let's start with this. I was not a fan of this. I didn't like it when Kirby Hocutt went on or Cody Campbell and some of the insinuations. I know that Yormark, like other conference commissioners, fighting for their conference and their brethren, whatever. But he started out talking about how proud he was of Arizona State, and he should have been, in their effort and almost a play away from beating Texas. As a member of the College Football Playoff Management Committee, I have had multiple discussions seeking clarity surrounding the targeting call on Arizona State's final drive of the fourth quarter with Richard Clark, who, of course, is the executive director. Moving forward, I think we need to address ensuring the national standards are developed. So that means everything across the board. These standards will be crucial to the college football future. Look forward to discussing them with my fellow committee members. This was not like an in-your-face, complete whiny statement. I get what he's saying. I don't know if they could ever have clarity across the board. Here's the problem. We went through this before. The targeting call or non-call, and then you go back to the call against the receiver from Texas getting hit on the interception. Then you go, well, yeah, what about the second quarter? So that's why I try to stay away from specific calls.
I don't think that's what he's saying here, though, in my opinion.
I don't think he's talking about that specific call. I don't think he's talking about that.
I think he's talking about what we talked about last week. What is targeting? Let's get a definition of it, and it's not being so nebulous. And let's not, I also, I've always thought the notion is bad as, you don't make that call then. No, you make the call.
No, you make the call.
The game's 60 minutes long. You make the same call, and second one is as the last second. You make the calls when the rules are violated. That's when you're supposed to make the calls. And then, people won't say, you don't make that call then or whatever.
That
then
comes from the NBA.
Yeah, they could be. Yeah. I get it. But, that's one of the things that was well, you don't make that call then. No, bullcrap. You make that call when you make that call. If it's targeting, it's targeting. Let's get into a situation because now targeting has become what is a catch. And, that's the new thing. Because I don't know, if you ask me, do you think that's targeting? And I say yes, and then they come back and say no, then I automatically think, well, I guess I don't know what targeting is. I don't know. So that's where I think he's coming from there.
Yeah, I saw this quote originally, and I was like, oh, this ought to be interesting to hear what he has to say. And it was a big ball of nothing really other than just saying what I think a lot of other people are saying right now or hoping for, and that is a national standard of officiating across college football. Mm-hmm. Nothing more, nothing less. He wasn't saying Arizona State got screwed. He wasn't igniting an atomic bomb, to go and raise college football and completely turn it on its head. And, nothing extremely serious in any way other than just saying, hey, we're really proud of Arizona State, as they should be. They represented us very well, that they did. But, yeah, we feel like we kind of got screwed on this call. And while we could probably take the route of Utah's AD and really make this a thing,
yep.
Instead he just said, hey, Arizona State did us really proud. But, can we figure out this freaking targeting thing already? What is this? I think that's all he's saying, and that if you want to be a big boy sport and college football wants to be the NFL, clearly so many people in power want it to be, it's only logical that things need to change for the better in some cases, and officiating is right there near the top of the list. I think to not have across-the-board officiating is understandable given where the game has been, and it's understandable given some of the uniqueness where it's not a 32-team league, where it's chartered planes and all this for the officials and everything else, and full-time jobs, and this is all they do really. These are, different circumstances, and you're going all over the country, and, everything's just kind of different wherever you go. But that should not be the case with officiating, where you're in the SEC, so you more prone to call this than if you were doing the Big 12 game or you're doing the ACC game. You don't call that here, but you call that in the Big 10. Like, that should not be the case. It should be across the board. So with that, he's just stating what I think is the obvious need for college football, and that is across the board officiating. We don't need the Big 12 crew and the Pac-12 crew, and then we shuffle them around. We just need the crews. Like, the crews all call the games the same ways, no matter if they're calling a game in California during the daytime or they're in Michigan at night. It should not be different based on your geography and the style of play. It should be that's targeting or it's not targeting, and that rule is at the very top of the confusion. Clearly, because every weekend it's you don't know what's targeting or not.
I agree on all of that, but my part of it is I think that they should even be more specific and come up with specific targeting levels of calls. In basketball, you have a flagrant 1 or 2. If you have, like, for example, what's the guy's name? Draymond Green compiles a bunch of them, then he's suspended for whatever. I think that targeting should not be an immediate ejection. I think that you ought to have some sort of, I'm not saying point system, because I don't want to make it more complicated, but it just seems to be such a damning penalty. It's not only 15 yards, it's you're gone.
Oh, and it's happened how many times in, like, big moment situations?
And then you miss the next half of the next game.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems extremely over the top. Like, I get that this rule was made particularly when we were all very concerned about head injuries, right? Everybody all of a sudden, the NFL started to smell those lawsuits, and they were like, uh-oh, we better be, like, the most pro head injury, like, concern, people as much as we possibly can be, and they were, and everybody kind of woke up as we just live and learn and learn that things need to be tweaked. Hey, these head injuries are a real scare and real concern, and they need to be cleaned up. And so the reaction was extreme, and I think was made under a little bit of a shroud of not really knowing exactly what you're dealing with necessarily. But now I do think you have a much clearer picture. It's been handled now in certain ways for a few years now. Why can't it be time for another bit of a tweak or another bit of a change to what we've been doing? I think that's certainly called for. You hear a lot of coaches who don't like the rules or the lack of clarity, and I think that's just a big thing for fans, media, players, coaches, is you just never know. Like, what seems clear targeting, Arizona State game, is not targeting. It seemed like it was absolutely targeting, but it wasn't. You watch that game on another day and maybe even change the teams or whatever, that's targeting. With a different crew, that's targeting, right? So, like, that should not be the case. It's either that or it's not. It should be black and white, not different shades of gray. And I feel like we've been living in different shades of gray, and it's a flip of the coin on what crew you got and what game you got and where you got it and how that's going to be called, and that should not be the way it goes.
This is also I'll give you another example of other things. Like, when teams change conferences, there shouldn't be press conferences about what's a rule in one conference and what's a rule in the other conference. Like, it should be a rule across the way. Like, is this a point of emphasis in all of this? Look, we sat here, Walt Anderson was in charge of the Big 12 officials for years, and I've been to a lot of games that Walt Anderson officiates in the NFL. I know the NFL kind of was a little bit like, okay, it's a Walt. We're going to call everything that looks like a holding. Like, Walt does not like holding. He hates it. So his crew, like the umpire and his crew, is like, if you're not calling, it's like a speed ticket quotient. If you're not calling these holdings, then we're going to get a new umpire who will, kind of a thing. And that's really just not how you should do it. You should officiate the game across the board the same. The other thing is, if you get rid of conference officials, then maybe you give your fans a bit of a reprieve from the guys that they maybe don't trust as much anymore.
Well, that's
and you
no.
But, okay, let me finish my thought. If you do that, if you send them somewhere else and they get some new officials, they have less to bitch about.
I am not going to make decisions on who my officials are based on some fan being upset about, well, he's from Tuscaloosa or something.
But if you can take,
you got to live somewhere.
But if you take that out of an equation, if you send the Tuscaloosa guy to Oregon occasionally, if he's not always doing the games in the conference,
well, okay, no, I get that. Then
you can eliminate that.
Baseball got away from having National League umpires at different strike zones and American League umpires.
If you have a crew that's mostly worked ACC games. If you start throwing them in the Big 12 a little bit,
who's going to pay for the travel and who's going to pay for all that? I mean, football's got billions of dollars.
They have plenty of money. Okay. So who's going to pay for it? When it comes to who's going to pay for it in college football, that question's over.
Here's
college football pay for it.
Tom Rucker, targeting is subjective. It's football. The hit by Tapp was face mask to face mask. He did not launch. He kept his head up, made the tackle. Now, Tom, I agree with you almost everything you said. The only part about the Tapp hit, if you'll notice, that even if he led with his face mask, there was connection just glanced. In that call, I would say, if it happened 40 times this year, was called targeting 38 times. Doesn't mean it should have been, but that, as you mentioned, though, it's subjective.
I think bigger picture, you can figure out the moving around of officials and the payments of it and all that. I think just the fact that every time there's a targeting call, none of us know what the hell it's going to be. Like that specifically, yes, you're right, it's very subjective, but it should not be a total crapshoot, I feel like, every time you see it of nobody in the room can agree on what it actually is. All these years later that we've been watching this, we still don't have a good idea when we watch it, and that's the problem to me. It's not so much debating a specific call. It's that if there was a targeting call like that in the next game, you're going to have 100 people in a room and they'll have 12 different opinions. You know what I mean? And that's the part where was it holding or was it not? Now you'll have some people that will see a hold and say, nope, that wasn't by the definition, and will argue against it because they're a fan of the other team or whatever. But you're right, it's very subjective. I just feel like there should be a little bit more clarity and an ability to kind of know what you're watching and not be so confused by it the majority of the time you see that call made in games.
All right. Let's see. Someone said it's football. Let them play. Well, that's not going to happen because we mentioned the concussions. You can't sack the quarterback even high or low anymore. The low tackle is in the NFL, not in college. Just make it a yardage penalty. That's another response. Let's see here. There was one more. Go across the middle and accept the possibility of permanent brain damage. Yep, that's freaking genius.
Okay. Here, we've devolved into...
We've gone to a different conversation.
This is a different conversation. Our point isn't... Look, they just need to tell us what it is. And if it's any of these things, then that's what it is. But they're not. They're like... Again, he's right. It is subjective because they've got to go to the replay and look at it. And then somebody's going, I guess... The other thing I think they need to do is sending the official over to the little video screen is a waste of time.
Oh, the NFL's the absolute best. Dude, they just call down, boom, it's done. They move on. It's not even a thing. They don't even go to the camera. It's done. And now, granted, they have a different setup. But before we go any further, this is not a conversation about whether targeting should exist. It's not a conversation about risk. It's just a conversation saying that, there should just be uniform rules across the board that if we're watching a game, we pretty much know if that's targeting or not. Not having a week-long debate on whether this one particular hit was targeting or not.
But don't we have that same debate on holding and pass interference and all that? Here's another thing. Paxton goes, it's football, let them play. But Paxton against Georgia, Texas benefited from I think 2, 3, or 4 targeting calls. And Georgia was upset on the other side because they didn't know. The leaning with the head, the leading with the head. That's not what we're talking about. I think that a lot of it could be fixed by having different levels of targeting. But it's impossible at the same time. These players are bigger, better, faster, and stronger than ever before. And just a minuscule half a second, a player can change his head angle and create targeting one way or the other. So I don't know if they can actually do anything about it, except we just bitch about it and argue about it and get upset about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, they just need to have some clarity. Clarity is a good thing. And also clarity allows you to admit, look, they need clarity, they need transparency, all these things will make it better. Have a director of officiating for the entire NCAA. Have the crew chief go talk to the pool reporter like you do afterwards, as opposed to hiding them away when they don't have to answer for it. And yeah, and then letting, we'll know who the good crews are because of the ones in the playoffs. Right now, I don't know if the crew that I'm watching a bowl game and is a good crew or not. I just know that they're available.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Yeah, Paxton goes, you can tell if it's intentional or not. I don't think you can. I think there's some that are pretty obvious. I think there are some that are blatantly obvious. I don't think you can. I think the game is too fast for you to really tell whether somebody is intentionally. There are some where it's bad. The guy should be ejected 15 yards. I don't know, but I think most of the targeting calls, 7 out of every 10 can go either way, and so whoever's one fan base or another, we're going to disagree.